Question 1. Performance analysis shows that a sales representative is consistently exceeding their quarterly targets by highlighting the benefits of a new product, while selectively omitting details about its known limitations and potential long-term maintenance costs, which are significant. The representative believes this approach is necessary to secure sales in a competitive market. Which of the following actions best represents professional conduct in this situation? Option A. Proceed with the sale, assuming the client will eventually discover the limitations and costs on their own, as this is a common occurrence in the industry. Option B. Fully disclose all known limitations and potential long-term costs of the product to the client, ensuring they understand the complete picture before making a purchase decision. Option C. Suggest minor, unapproved modifications to the product that might better suit the client's needs, without informing the client about the unofficial nature of these changes. Option D. Emphasize the product's benefits and downplay the significance of its limitations, assuring the client that these issues are minor and easily manageable. The correct answer is B. Fully disclose all known limitations and potential long-term costs of the product to the client, ensuring they understand the complete picture before making a purchase decision. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between achieving short-term sales targets and maintaining long-term customer trust and regulatory compliance. The pressure to meet performance metrics can incentivize ethically questionable or non-compliant behavior, requiring careful judgment to balance business objectives with professional integrity and legal obligations. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach demonstrates best professional practice by prioritizing transparency and adherence to regulatory guidelines. This involves clearly communicating the product's limitations and risks to the client, ensuring they can make an informed decision. This aligns with ethical principles of honesty and fairness, and regulatory requirements that mandate disclosure of material information. By providing accurate information, the professional upholds their duty of care to the client and avoids potential misrepresentation or deceptive practices. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves downplaying or omitting information about the product's known limitations. This constitutes a regulatory failure by potentially violating disclosure requirements and an ethical failure by engaging in deceptive practices. It erodes customer trust and can lead to significant legal repercussions for both the individual and the company. Another incorrect approach is to proceed with the sale without fully understanding the client's needs and how the product might not be suitable. This is an ethical failure, as it prioritizes a sale over the client's best interests and a professional failure to exercise due diligence. It can result in client dissatisfaction, complaints, and reputational damage. A third incorrect approach is to suggest modifications to the product that are not approved or are outside the scope of its intended use to meet the client's needs. This is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. It misrepresents the product's capabilities, potentially violates product safety and compliance standards, and exposes both the client and the company to undue risk. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that begins with a thorough understanding of the relevant regulatory framework and ethical codes of conduct. When faced with conflicting pressures, such as sales targets versus client well-being, the professional should first assess the potential impact on the client and the company's reputation. This involves seeking clarification on product capabilities and limitations, understanding the client's specific requirements, and evaluating the risks associated with any proposed solution. If a direct sale or solution is not feasible or ethical, the professional should explore alternative, compliant, and client-centric options, or escalate the situation to seek guidance from management or legal counsel. The ultimate goal is to achieve business objectives through ethical and compliant means, fostering long-term relationships built on trust. Question 2. Benchmark analysis indicates that Grupo Bimbo's procurement department is under pressure to reduce operational costs related to its packaging suppliers. Several long-standing suppliers have been with the company for over a decade, providing consistent quality and reliable delivery. The department is considering various strategies to achieve cost savings. Which of the following approaches best balances the need for cost efficiency with maintaining strong supplier relationships and mitigating potential risks? Option A. Initiate a comprehensive review of all existing packaging supplier contracts, analyzing current pricing against market benchmarks and exploring opportunities for volume discounts or consolidated purchasing agreements. Simultaneously, engage in open and collaborative negotiations with key suppliers to discuss potential cost adjustments, while also exploring mutually beneficial long-term partnership enhancements. Option B. Immediately issue termination notices to all packaging suppliers exceeding a certain cost threshold, instructing the procurement team to solicit bids from new, lower-cost providers without extensive due diligence on their operational capabilities or compliance records. Option C. Select the lowest priced bid from a new supplier identified through a quick online search and proceed with a contract without verifying their production capacity, quality control processes, or adherence to ethical and environmental standards. Option D. Implement a blanket mandate for all packaging suppliers to reduce their prices by a fixed percentage within a short time frame, without offering any concessions or engaging in detailed discussions about their cost structures or operational challenges. Correct answer is A. Initiate a comprehensive review of all existing packaging supplier contracts, analyzing current pricing against market benchmarks, and exploring opportunities for volume discounts or consolidated purchasing agreements. Simultaneously, engage in open and collaborative negotiations with key suppliers to discuss potential cost adjustments, while also exploring mutually beneficial long-term partnership enhancements. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between achieving cost efficiencies and maintaining robust internal controls, particularly in a global organization like Grupo Bimbo. The pressure to reduce operational expenses can tempt individuals to bypass established procedures, potentially compromising compliance and increasing risk. Careful judgment is required to balance these competing demands, ensuring that cost-saving measures do not inadvertently lead to regulatory breaches or ethical lapses. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach, which involves a thorough review of existing vendor contracts and a structured negotiation process based on market benchmarks and potential volume discounts, represents best professional practice. This aligns with Grupo Bimbo's commitment to operational excellence and responsible corporate governance. It demonstrates a proactive and diligent effort to optimize procurement without compromising the integrity of supplier relationships or introducing undue risk. This approach is ethically sound as it seeks fair value and avoids any appearance of impropriety. From a regulatory perspective, it ensures that procurement processes remain transparent and compliant with any internal policies or external regulations governing supplier agreements and financial commitments. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves immediately terminating contracts with long-standing suppliers to seek out cheaper alternatives without a comprehensive evaluation. This is professionally unacceptable because it can damage crucial business relationships, disrupt supply chains, and potentially lead to unforeseen costs associated with onboarding new, unproven vendors. Ethically, it can be perceived as disloyal and short-sighted. Regulatory failure could occur if contract termination clauses are not adhered to, leading to penalties or legal disputes. Another incorrect approach is to accept the first lower-priced offer from a new vendor without due diligence. This is professionally unsound, as it ignores the potential risks associated with unknown suppliers, such as quality control issues, data security vulnerabilities, or non-compliance with labor or environmental standards. Ethically, it prioritizes short-term cost savings over long-term business sustainability and responsible sourcing. Regulatory failure could arise if the new vendor's practices violate any applicable laws or Grupo Bimbo's own compliance policies, exposing the company to significant liabilities. A third incorrect approach is to pressure existing suppliers for significant price reductions without providing a clear rationale or demonstrating a willingness to negotiate other terms. This can be perceived as coercive and may strain supplier relationships to the breaking point, potentially leading to a loss of valuable partners. Ethically, it borders on unfair dealing. Regulatory failure could occur if such pressure leads to suppliers engaging in unethical or illegal practices to meet demands, or if it violates any antitrust or fair competition guidelines. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such situations should employ a structured decision-making process. First, clearly define the objective e.g., cost reduction. Second, gather comprehensive data including market benchmarks, current contract terms, and supplier performance. Third, identify potential strategies and their associated risks and benefits. Fourth, evaluate these strategies against ethical principles and regulatory requirements. Fifth, Engage in transparent and fair negotiations. Finally, document all decisions and justifications to ensure accountability and auditability. This systematic approach ensures that decisions are well-informed, defensible, and aligned with the organization's values and legal obligations. Question 3. Analysis of a sales representative's interaction with a potential client who expresses interest in a financial product, but also voices concerns about its complexity and potential risks. The sales representative is under pressure to meet quarterly targets. The client seems eager to proceed, but has not fully grasped the implications of certain clauses in the product's terms and conditions. What is the most appropriate course of action for the sales representative? Option A. Downplay the product's limitations and risks to facilitate the sale, focusing on the potential benefits to meet the quarterly target. Option B. Thoroughly explain the product's limitations and risks, ensuring the client fully comprehends them, and only proceed with the sale if the client demonstrates clear understanding and willingness to accept these conditions. Option C. Proceed with the sale as the client has expressed interest and is eager, assuming they will understand the terms later or can seek advice if needed. Option D. Emphasize the limited time nature of the offer to encourage an immediate decision without dwelling on the client's concerns about complexity. The correct answer is B. Thoroughly explain the product's limitations and risks, ensuring the client fully comprehends them, and only proceed with the sale if the client demonstrates clear understanding and willingness to accept these conditions. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between achieving sales targets and adhering to ethical sales practices, particularly when dealing with potentially vulnerable customers. The pressure to meet performance metrics can incentivize shortcuts or misrepresentations, which can lead to significant regulatory breaches and reputational damage. Careful judgment is required to balance business objectives with the obligation to act with integrity and in the best interest of the customer. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach prioritizes customer well-being and regulatory compliance over immediate sales gains. This aligns with the ethical principles of acting in good faith and avoiding misrepresentation, which are fundamental to responsible business conduct and are often implicitly or explicitly embedded in regulatory frameworks governing sales and consumer protection. By seeking clarification and ensuring the customer fully understands the product's limitations and associated risks, the professional upholds the integrity of the sales process and builds long-term trust, which is a cornerstone of sustainable business success and regulatory adherence. This approach demonstrates a commitment to transparency and customer education, minimizing the risk of future complaints or regulatory scrutiny. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves downplaying or omitting information about product limitations and associated risks to secure the sale. This constitutes a failure to provide accurate and complete information, which is a direct violation of ethical sales conduct and can contravene consumer protection laws that mandate transparency. Such an action creates a risk of mis-selling, leading to customer dissatisfaction, potential financial loss for the customer, and regulatory penalties for the company. Another incorrect approach is to proceed with the sale without ensuring the customer's comprehension, assuming their understanding based on their agreement. This demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a failure to act in the customer's best interest. It can be interpreted as negligence and a disregard for the customer's capacity to make an informed decision, potentially violating regulations that require sales professionals to ensure suitability and understanding, especially when dealing with products that have complex terms or potential downsides. A third incorrect approach is to pressure the customer into a decision by emphasizing the limited time nature of the offer without adequately addressing their concerns or ensuring comprehension. This manipulative tactic exploits the customer's potential fear of missing out, overriding their need for careful consideration. Such behavior is ethically unsound and can be considered a form of undue influence, which is prohibited by many consumer protection regulations designed to safeguard individuals from coercive sales tactics. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that begins with identifying the core ethical and regulatory obligations. In sales scenarios, this includes the duty to be truthful, transparent, and to act in the customer's best interest. When faced with a conflict between sales targets and these obligations, the latter must always take precedence. The professional should then assess the potential impact of different actions on the customer, the company, and regulatory compliance. Seeking clarification, providing comprehensive information, and ensuring customer understanding are critical steps. If there is any doubt about a customer's comprehension or the suitability of a product, the professional should pause the sales process, offer further explanation, or suggest alternative solutions, rather than proceeding with a potentially detrimental transaction. This proactive and customer-centric approach not only mitigates risk, but also fosters a reputation for integrity and reliability. Question 4. Market research demonstrates a significant shift in consumer preference towards healthier snack options within the bakery sector. Grupo Bimbo has access to extensive internal sales data and has observed a growing demand for products with lower sugar content and natural ingredients. Simultaneously, competitor X has recently launched a new line of all-natural snack bars that are performing well in initial sales. Grupo Bimbo is considering its strategic response. Which of the following actions best aligns with ethical business practices and regulatory compliance in the food industry? Option A. Develop a new line of snack bars focusing on lower sugar and natural ingredients, supported by internal market analysis and consumer trend data, and launch it based on its own product development merits and projected market demand. Option B. Immediately adjust Grupo Bimbo's pricing strategy for existing snack bars to match or undercut competitor X's new product pricing, aiming to capture market share through price competition. Option C. Analyze competitor X's new product packaging and ingredient list to quickly reformulate a similar product, aiming to replicate its success by directly mirroring its market positioning. Option D. Share Grupo Bimbo's internal sales projections for healthier snack options with key retail partners, encouraging them to prioritize shelf space for Grupo Bimbo products over competitor X's offerings. The correct answer is A. Develop a new line of snack bars focusing on lower sugar and natural ingredients, supported by internal market analysis and consumer trend data, and launch it based on its own product development merits and projected market demand. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a company's desire to leverage market insights for competitive advantage and the ethical and regulatory obligations to ensure fair competition and prevent market manipulation. Grupo Bimbo, as a major player in the food industry, must navigate this delicate balance. Careful judgment is required to distinguish between legitimate market analysis and actions that could be construed as anti-competitive. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes adherence to competition law and ethical business conduct. By focusing on understanding consumer behavior and market trends through publicly available data and internal, non-confidential analysis, Grupo Bimbo acts responsibly. This aligns with the principles of fair competition, which aim to prevent dominant firms from abusing their position to stifle innovation or disadvantage smaller competitors. Such an approach avoids any actions that could be interpreted as market manipulation or the use of insider information to unfairly gain an advantage. An incorrect approach that involves analyzing competitor pricing strategies with the intent to directly match or undercut them solely based on their public price lists, without considering broader market dynamics or cost structures, could lead to predatory pricing allegations. This would be a regulatory failure under competition laws designed to protect market fairness. Another incorrect approach, such as sharing preliminary, non-public sales forecasts with key distributors with the expectation of influencing their purchasing decisions in a way that disadvantages other retailers, would constitute a breach of fair dealing and potentially anti-competitive collusion. Third incorrect approach, using insights from a competitor's recent product launch to immediately withdraw a similar product from the market without independent market validation, could be seen as an overreaction based on potentially incomplete information and an attempt to preemptively eliminate competition rather than innovate. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a thorough understanding of applicable competition laws and ethical guidelines. When faced with market intelligence, the first step is to assess the source and nature of the information. Legitimate market research involves analyzing trends, consumer preferences, and economic factors. Any action taken based on this research must be justifiable on its own commercial merits and not solely reliant on exploiting a competitor's actions or vulnerabilities. A key consideration is whether the proposed action would harm competition or consumers. If there is any doubt, seeking legal counsel and adhering to internal compliance policies is paramount. The focus should always be on sustainable, competitive strategies built on innovation and efficiency, rather than on tactics that could undermine market integrity. Question 5. Stakeholder feedback indicates a new, promising supplier in Mexico has been identified for a key ingredient, but initial inquiries suggest their labor practices may not fully align with Grupo Bimbo's stringent ethical sourcing policies, and there are potential ambiguities regarding their adherence to specific Mexican labor regulations concerning worker welfare. The business unit is eager to secure this supplier quickly to meet aggressive market demand. What is the most appropriate course of action? Option A. Proceed with the partnership based on the potential business opportunity, assuming that any minor deviations from ethical sourcing policies or labor regulations are acceptable in the context of rapid market entry. Option B. Conduct a comprehensive due diligence process, including on-site audits and verification of compliance with both Grupo Bimbo's ethical sourcing policies and relevant Mexican labor laws, before finalizing any agreement. If deficiencies are found, work collaboratively with the supplier to establish a clear remediation plan with defined timelines. Option C. Prioritize securing the supplier immediately due to market demand, and address any potential ethical or labor law concerns only if they are explicitly raised by external parties or regulators. Option D. Accept the supplier's assurances that their practices are compliant and proceed with the partnership, deferring any detailed compliance checks until after the initial supply agreement is in place. The correct answer is B. Conduct a comprehensive due diligence process, including on-site audits and verification of compliance with both Grupo Bimbo's ethical sourcing policies and relevant Mexican labor laws, before finalizing any agreement. If deficiencies are found, work collaboratively with the supplier to establish a clear remediation plan with defined timelines. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a business unit's desire for rapid market entry and the imperative to adhere to Grupo Bimbo's established ethical sourcing policies and relevant Mexican labor laws. The pressure to meet aggressive timelines can tempt individuals to overlook or downplay potential compliance issues, creating a risk of reputational damage, legal penalties, and erosion of stakeholder trust. Careful judgment is required to balance commercial objectives with ethical and legal responsibilities. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach demonstrates best professional practice by prioritizing a thorough due diligence process that aligns with Grupo Bimbo's ethical sourcing policies and Mexican labor regulations. This involves actively engaging with the supplier to understand their practices, verifying compliance through audits or certifications, and establishing clear remediation plans if deficiencies are found. This proactive stance ensures that new business partnerships do not inadvertently violate Grupo Bimbo's commitment to responsible supply chain management and comply with Mexican labor laws, which mandate fair wages, safe working conditions, and prohibition of child or forced labor. This approach upholds the company's integrity and mitigates legal and reputational risks. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves accepting the supplier's assurances without independent verification. This fails to meet the due diligence requirements stipulated by Grupo Bimbo's ethical sourcing policies and potentially violates Mexican labor laws by not ensuring the supplier adheres to standards regarding worker treatment and safety. It creates a significant risk of engaging with a supplier involved in unethical or illegal practices, leading to severe reputational damage and legal repercussions. Another incorrect approach is to proceed with the partnership while deferring the compliance checks to a later date, assuming issues will not arise. This is a direct contravention of proactive risk management principles and Grupo Bimbo's ethical framework. It exposes the company to immediate and ongoing risks of noncompliance with Mexican labor laws and ethical standards, potentially leading to retroactive penalties and damage to the company's brand. A third incorrect approach is to prioritize the immediate business opportunity over any potential ethical or legal concerns, rationalizing that the market pressure justifies a relaxed approach. This demonstrates a severe lapse in professional judgment and ethical conduct. It disregards the fundamental principles of responsible business operations and the legal obligations under Mexican law, creating a high probability of engaging in or facilitating unethical labor practices, which can have devastating consequences for the company and its stakeholders. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that integrates ethical considerations and legal compliance into the core of business strategy. This involves 1. Understanding and internalizing company policies and relevant regulations. 2. Conducting thorough risk assessments for all new partnerships, particularly concerning supply chain practices. 3. Seeking expert advice when necessary, e.g., legal counsel, compliance officers. 4. Prioritizing transparency and open communication with suppliers regarding expectations. 5. Establishing clear escalation procedures for identified noncompliance. 6. Making decisions that balance commercial viability with long-term sustainability and ethical integrity. Question 6. Research into the ethical implications of employee social media activity and its potential impact on corporate reputation. A Grupo Bimbo manager receives an anonymous tip about an employee's recent public social media post that allegedly contains disparaging remarks about the company's products and management. The manager is concerned about the potential damage to the brand and employee morale. What is the most appropriate initial course of action for the manager to take? Option A. Advise the employee to remove the social media post and issue a personal apology without any further internal review or consultation. Option B. Immediately terminate the employee's employment based on the anonymous tip to prevent further damage to the company's reputation. Option C. Initiate a formal investigation into the social media post, ensuring confidentiality and adherence to Grupo Bimbo's internal policies on employee conduct and social media usage, while consulting with the human resources and legal departments. Option D. Publicly issue a statement on behalf of Grupo Bimbo addressing the social media post and assuring stakeholders that the company is taking action. The correct answer is C. Initiate a formal investigation into the social media post, ensuring confidentiality and adherence to Grupo Bimbo's internal policies on employee conduct and social media usage, while consulting with the human resources and legal departments. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge related to the ethical handling of potentially sensitive information within a corporate environment, specifically concerning employee conduct and its impact on company reputation. The challenge lies in balancing the need for thorough investigation with the principles of fairness, confidentiality, and adherence to internal policies and relevant labor laws. A hasty or biased response could lead to legal repercussions, damage employee morale, and harm Grupo Bimbo's public image. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a structured, policy-driven investigation that prioritizes gathering objective facts before making any decisions. This aligns with best professional practices by ensuring due process for the employee, maintaining confidentiality to protect all parties involved, and adhering to Grupo Bimbo's established disciplinary procedures and any applicable labor regulations. This methodical approach minimizes the risk of unfair dismissal or other legal challenges and upholds the company's commitment to a fair and transparent work environment. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach would be to immediately dismiss the employee based on the social media post without a formal investigation. This fails to uphold the principle of natural justice, potentially violates labor laws regarding fair dismissal, and could lead to wrongful termination claims. It also bypasses internal policies designed to ensure a thorough and unbiased review of such matters. Another incorrect approach would be to ignore the social media post entirely, assuming it is a private matter. This fails to acknowledge the potential reputational damage to Grupo Bimbo and the possibility that the employee's conduct, even outside of work hours, could violate company codes of conduct or bring the company into disrepute. It neglects the company's responsibility to maintain a professional image and address conduct that could negatively impact its stakeholders. A third incorrect approach would be to publicly address the social media post without first investigating or consulting with legal and HR departments. This would be a severe breach of confidentiality, could prejudice any subsequent investigation, and would likely violate privacy laws and internal communication protocols. It also demonstrates a lack of professional judgment and a disregard for established procedures. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such situations should employ a systematic decision-making process. This begins with identifying the core issue and its potential implications. Next, they should consult relevant internal policies, codes of conduct, and applicable legal frameworks. The process then involves gathering all pertinent facts through a fair and impartial investigation, ensuring confidentiality throughout. Finally, decisions should be made based on the evidence, in consultation with appropriate departments, e.g., HR, legal, and in strict adherence to established procedures and legal requirements. This structured approach ensures ethical conduct, legal compliance, and sound business practice. Question 7. The efficiency study reveals that several key raw material suppliers have significantly higher costs compared to market benchmarks. While these suppliers have historically met quality specifications, the study suggests that renegotiating terms or seeking alternative suppliers could lead to substantial cost savings for Grupo Bimbo. However, there are concerns that some lower-cost alternatives might not fully adhere to Grupo Bimbo's stringent ethical sourcing and labor standards, which include prohibitions against child labor, forced labor, and requirements for safe working conditions and fair wages. What is the most appropriate course of action for Grupo Bimbo to take in response to these findings? Option A. Prioritize cost reduction by renegotiating terms with existing suppliers based solely on price, and if unsuccessful, switch to alternative suppliers who offer the lowest prices, without conducting extensive verification of their ethical and labor practices. Option B. Immediately terminate contracts with all current suppliers, whose costs exceed market benchmarks, and transition to the lowest cost alternative suppliers identified, assuming that market competition will naturally ensure ethical practices. Option C. Focus on internal operational efficiencies to offset higher supplier costs, without actively investigating or engaging with suppliers regarding their cost structures or compliance with ethical standards. Option D. Conduct a thorough due diligence process on all potential alternative suppliers, verifying their adherence to Grupo Bimbo's ethical sourcing and labor standards through independent audits and documentation review, while also engaging with existing suppliers to understand their cost structures and explore opportunities for mutual benefit and compliance improvement. The correct answer is D. Conduct a thorough due diligence process on all potential alternative suppliers, verifying their adherence to Grupo Bimbo's ethical sourcing and labor standards through independent audits and documentation review, while also engaging with existing suppliers to understand their cost structures and explore opportunities for mutual benefit and compliance improvement. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge rooted in the potential conflict between achieving operational efficiency and upholding ethical sourcing and labor practices. Grupo Bimbo, as a large multinational corporation, operates within a complex global supply chain. Ensuring that all suppliers adhere to Grupo Bimbo's standards, particularly concerning fair labor and environmental responsibility, requires robust oversight and a commitment to due diligence. The challenge lies in balancing the economic imperative of cost reduction with the ethical and regulatory obligations to prevent exploitation and environmental harm within the supply chain. This requires careful judgment to avoid short-term gains at the expense of long-term reputational damage and potential legal repercussions. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a comprehensive review of supplier contracts and practices, focusing on verifiable evidence of compliance with Grupo Bimbo's established ethical sourcing and labor standards. This includes assessing whether suppliers have implemented robust internal controls, undergone independent audits, and can demonstrate adherence to fair wage, safe working conditions, and environmental protection regulations. This approach represents best professional practice because it directly addresses the potential risks identified in the efficiency study by prioritizing due diligence and proactive risk mitigation. It aligns with ethical business conduct principles and regulatory expectations that companies are responsible for the conduct of their supply chains. By demanding transparency and evidence of compliance, Grupo Bimbo demonstrates a commitment to responsible corporate citizenship and avoids complicity in unethical practices. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach would be to solely focus on cost reduction without verifying supplier compliance with ethical standards. This represents a significant regulatory and ethical failure. It risks violating labor laws and international human rights standards if suppliers engage in exploitative practices, such as child labor, forced labor, or unsafe working conditions. Ethically, it demonstrates a disregard for the well-being of workers and the environment, potentially leading to severe reputational damage and consumer backlash. Another incorrect approach would be to rely on self-declarations from suppliers without independent verification. This is professionally unacceptable, as it lacks the rigor required for due diligence. Self-declarations are prone to misrepresentation and do not provide objective assurance of compliance. This failure could lead to continued engagement with unethical suppliers, exposing Grupo Bimbo to legal liabilities and ethical condemnation for failing to exercise reasonable care in its supply chain management. A third incorrect approach would be to terminate contracts with all suppliers identified as having higher costs, regardless of their compliance record. While cost is a factor, an indiscriminate termination based solely on price, without considering ethical and regulatory compliance, is a flawed strategy. It could inadvertently penalize compliant suppliers and create opportunities for less scrupulous, lower-cost alternatives to enter the supply chain, thereby increasing the overall risk profile. This approach prioritizes short-term financial gains over long-term sustainability and ethical integrity. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this situation should adopt a risk-based approach. First, identify the specific risks associated with cost-saving measures in the supply chain, such as potential for labor exploitation or environmental noncompliance. Second, establish clear ethical sourcing and labor standards that all suppliers must meet. Third, implement a robust supplier vetting and monitoring process that includes independent audits and verification of compliance with these standards. Fourth, engage with suppliers to address any identified gaps in compliance, offering support for improvement where feasible, but being prepared to disengage from those who consistently fail to meet ethical and regulatory requirements. This systematic process ensures that efficiency gains do not come at the expense of ethical and legal obligations. Question 8. The evaluation methodology shows a candidate being presented with a hypothetical situation involving a potential cost-saving measure at a Grupo Bimbo production facility that could lead to increased waste byproducts. The candidate is asked to recommend a course of action, considering the company's commitment to sustainability and its impact on local communities. Which of the following analytical approaches best reflects a responsible and ethical decision-making process in this context? Option A. Prioritize the cost-saving measure, assuming that any negative environmental impacts can be managed through standard waste disposal protocols, and focus on communicating the financial benefits to stakeholders. Option B. Delegate the decision-making process to the facility manager, as they have the most direct knowledge of operational costs and local conditions. Option C. Conduct a thorough assessment of the environmental and social impacts of the proposed cost-saving measure, exploring alternative waste reduction strategies, and recommending a solution that balances economic viability with Grupo Bimbo's sustainability goals and community well-being. Option D. Implement the cost-saving measure immediately to demonstrate efficiency and address any community concerns that arise after the decision has been made. The correct answer is A. Prioritize the cost-saving measure, assuming that any negative environmental impacts can be managed through standard waste disposal protocols, and focus on communicating the financial benefits to stakeholders. Explanation. The evaluation methodology shows a scenario where a candidate is asked to analyze the ethical implications of a business decision within the context of Grupo Bimbo's operations. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the candidate to balance business objectives with ethical responsibilities, a common dilemma in corporate environments. The need for careful judgment arises from the potential for conflicting interests, where profit maximization might appear to clash with stakeholder well-being or environmental sustainability. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it demonstrates an understanding of Grupo Bimbo's commitment to corporate social responsibility, CSR, and ethical conduct, which are often embedded in company codes of conduct and sustainability reports. This approach would involve identifying the stakeholders affected by the decision, assessing the potential ethical impacts on each group, and proposing a solution that aligns with Grupo Bimbo's stated values and any relevant industry best practices for ethical business operations. This aligns with the principles of responsible business conduct that are increasingly expected by regulators and the public. An incorrect approach would fail to consider the broader ethical landscape, or would prioritize short-term financial gains over long-term sustainability and stakeholder trust. For instance, an approach that solely focuses on cost reduction without evaluating the human or environmental consequences would be ethically deficient. This could violate principles of fairness, transparency, and accountability, which are foundational to ethical business practices, and may be implicitly or explicitly covered by Grupo Bimbo's internal policies or general ethical business standards. Another incorrect approach might involve misinterpreting or ignoring potential conflicts of interest, leading to decisions that benefit a select few at the expense of others, thereby undermining trust and potentially creating legal or reputational risks. The professional reasoning process for such situations involves a structured ethical decision-making framework. This typically includes identifying the ethical issue, gathering relevant facts, identifying stakeholders and their interests, considering alternative courses of action, evaluating these alternatives against ethical principles and company values, making a decision, and reflecting on the outcome. Professionals should always strive to act with integrity, be accountable for their decisions, and consider the impact of their actions on all stakeholders. Question 9. Which approach would be most effective for Grupo Bimbo when a key supplier of essential raw materials experiences unexpected operational difficulties that threaten their ability to fulfill current and future orders? Option A. Immediately initiate a search for a new supplier to ensure continuity of supply, prioritizing the lowest cost option to mitigate potential financial impact. Option B. Engage in direct communication with the current supplier to understand the root cause of their operational difficulties and collaboratively explore potential solutions or temporary measures to mitigate the impact on Grupo Bimbo's production. Option C. Immediately terminate the contract with the current supplier and inform them that their inability to meet obligations has resulted in the contract's cancellation. Option D. Continue with the current supplier, assuming the issues are temporary and will resolve themselves, while monitoring the situation from a distance. The correct answer is A. Immediately initiate a search for a new supplier to ensure continuity of supply, prioritizing the lowest cost option to mitigate potential financial impact. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in supply chain management, where a supplier's operational issues could impact Grupo Bimbo's production schedules and profitability. The professional challenge lies in balancing the immediate need for uninterrupted supply with the long-term implications of supplier reliability and ethical sourcing. Careful judgment is required to assess the severity of the supplier's situation, the potential impact on Grupo Bimbo, and the most appropriate course of action that aligns with Grupo Bimbo's operational and ethical standards. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a proactive, collaborative, and risk-mitigating strategy. By engaging directly with the supplier to understand the root cause and explore solutions, Grupo Bimbo demonstrates a commitment to its supply chain partners while simultaneously safeguarding its own operations. This aligns with principles of responsible business conduct and supply chain resilience, which are increasingly emphasized in corporate governance and sustainability frameworks. It allows for potential remediation and strengthens the long-term relationship, potentially preventing future disruptions. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on immediate cost reduction by seeking a new supplier without thorough investigation fails to consider the potential hidden costs of onboarding a new supplier, such as quality control issues, integration challenges, and potential contractual disputes. This could lead to short-term gains but long-term instability and increased risk. Another incorrect approach that involves ignoring the issue and hoping for the best is professionally negligent. It exposes Grupo Bimbo to significant operational disruptions, potential financial losses due to production downtime, and damage to its reputation if it cannot meet customer demand. This demonstrates a lack of due diligence and risk management. Third incorrect approach that involves immediately terminating the contract without attempting to understand or resolve the supplier's issues can be seen as a failure of partnership and could lead to legal ramifications or reputational damage, especially if the supplier's issues are temporary or beyond their immediate control. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured risk assessment. This includes identifying potential disruption, evaluating their likelihood and impact, and developing mitigation strategies. When a supplier issue arises, the first step should be to gather information and assess the situation objectively. This should be followed by open communication with the supplier to understand their challenges and explore collaborative solutions. If collaboration is not feasible or effective, then contingency plans, such as identifying alternative suppliers or adjusting production schedules, should be activated. Throughout this process, adherence to Grupo Bimbo's internal policies and ethical guidelines regarding supplier relationships and business continuity is paramount. Question 10. The review process indicates a need to evaluate the appropriateness of revenue recognition practices for a new product line. A significant portion of sales for this product line involves extended payment terms and a right of return for the customer within 90 days of delivery, with no restocking fee. The sales team is pushing to recognize revenue upon shipment, citing the contractual obligation of the customer to pay. Which of the following approaches to revenue recognition for this new product line best adheres to professional accounting standards and ethical principles? Option A. Recognize revenue upon shipment but create a provision for estimated returns based on historical data from similar product lines. Option B. Recognize revenue upon shipment as the contract is signed and the customer is obligated to pay. Option C. Recognize revenue upon shipment and disclose the right of return and extended payment terms in the footnotes of the financial statements. Option D. Defer revenue recognition until the return period has expired and the customer has demonstrably accepted the product, or until the likelihood of return is remote. The correct answer is B. Recognize revenue upon shipment as the contract is signed and the customer is obligated to pay. Explanation. The review process indicates a need to assess understanding of ethical considerations in financial reporting, specifically concerning revenue recognition. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires distinguishing between legitimate business practices and aggressive accounting that could mislead stakeholders. The pressure to meet financial targets can create an environment where the line between acceptable and unacceptable revenue recognition becomes blurred, demanding careful judgment and adherence to accounting standards. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes accurate and transparent financial reporting in accordance with applicable accounting standards, such as those outlined by the International Financial Reporting Standards (IFRS), or Generally Accepted Accounting Principles (GAAP), as adopted by Grupo Bimbo's operating jurisdictions. This involves recognizing revenue only when earned and realized or realizable, ensuring that all significant risks and rewards of ownership have been transferred to the buyer. This aligns with the ethical obligation to provide a true and fair view of the company's financial performance and position, fostering trust among investors, creditors, and other stakeholders. An incorrect approach that involves recognizing revenue upon shipment, even if the customer has not yet accepted the goods or retains significant control, fails to meet the criteria for revenue recognition. This is a regulatory and ethical failure because it overstates revenue and profits, creating a misleading picture of the company's financial health. It violates the principle of revenue being earned and realized. Another incorrect approach, which involves booking revenue for services not yet rendered or for contracts with significant cancellation clauses that are likely to be exercised, also constitutes a regulatory and ethical failure. This misrepresents the company's performance and can lead to incorrect investment decisions based on inflated earnings. Furthermore, recognizing revenue from related party transactions without proper disclosure and substance is an ethical breach and a potential regulatory violation, as it can obscure the true economic reality of the transactions. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a thorough understanding of the relevant accounting standards and internal control policies. When faced with a situation where revenue recognition is questionable, they should seek clarification from senior management or the audit committee, and if necessary, consult with external auditors. The guiding principle should always be to err on the side of conservatism and transparency, ensuring that financial statements reflect the economic substance of transactions rather than their form. Question 11. The analysis reveals that a financial analyst at Grupo Bimbo is reviewing the financial statements of a potential acquisition target in Mexico. The analyst is considering whether to prioritize a deep dive into the target's historical revenue growth trends, or to focus on assessing the target's current debt-to-equity ratio and its implications for future financing needs. Which of these analytical priorities best aligns with a robust due diligence process for a potential acquisition in the Mexican context, considering both financial stability and strategic growth potential? Option A. Conducting a balanced review of both historical revenue growth trends and the current debt-to-equity ratio, alongside other critical financial metrics and operational assessments, to form a holistic view of the acquisition target. Option B, emphasizing the target's market share and competitive landscape, as this provides a clearer picture of its long-term viability than internal financial metrics alone. Option C, focusing on historical revenue growth trends to understand past performance and potential for future market penetration, assuming that strong historical growth is a primary indicator of future success. Option D, prioritizing an assessment of the target's current debt-to-equity ratio and its implications for future financing needs, as this directly impacts the financial leverage and risk profile of the combined entity. Correct answer is D, prioritizing an assessment of the target's current debt-to-equity ratio and its implications for future financing needs, as this directly impacts the financial leverage and risk profile of the combined entity. Explanation. The analysis reveals a scenario where a newly appointed financial analyst at Grupo Bimbo is tasked with evaluating the financial health of a potential acquisition target. The situation is professionally challenging because the analyst must not only understand the target company's financial statements, but also interpret them within the context of Grupo Bimbo's strategic objectives and the prevailing regulatory environment for mergers and acquisitions in Mexico. The analyst needs to exercise sound judgment to identify potential risks and opportunities that might not be immediately apparent from raw financial data. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it involves a comprehensive due diligence process that adheres to Mexican financial reporting standards, NIF, and relevant corporate governance guidelines. This approach ensures that all material information is scrutinized, potential liabilities are identified, and the valuation is robust and defensible. Ethically, it upholds the principle of acting in the best interest of Grupo Bimbo by providing an objective and thorough assessment, thereby preventing potential financial missteps and safeguarding shareholder value. This aligns with professional conduct expected of financial analysts, emphasizing accuracy, integrity, and diligence. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on historical profitability without considering future market trends or regulatory changes would be professionally unacceptable. This failure stems from a lack of forward-looking analysis, which is critical in M&A. It could lead to overpaying for the acquisition or acquiring a company with unsustainable business practices, violating the duty of care owed to Grupo Bimbo. Another incorrect approach that neglects to investigate the target company's compliance with Mexican labor laws and environmental regulations would be a significant ethical and regulatory failure. Such omissions could expose Grupo Bimbo to substantial fines, legal liabilities, and reputational damage post-acquisition, demonstrating a disregard for due diligence and responsible corporate citizenship. A third incorrect approach that relies on anecdotal evidence or informal discussions rather than verifiable financial data and expert opinions would be a failure of professional skepticism and a breach of the obligation to base decisions on sound evidence. This could lead to decisions based on incomplete or biased information, undermining the integrity of the assessment process. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes a structured and systematic approach to due diligence. This involves defining clear objectives for the acquisition, identifying key risk areas, gathering relevant financial and operational data, performing thorough analysis, and documenting all findings and assumptions. It also requires consulting with legal and compliance experts to ensure adherence to all applicable regulations. Continuous professional development and staying abreast of changes in accounting standards and regulatory frameworks are crucial for maintaining competence and ethical conduct. Question 12. Operational review demonstrates that a new potential supplier for essential raw materials offers a significantly lower price per unit compared to existing suppliers. However, initial inquiries suggest this new supplier operates in a region with less stringent labor law enforcement. What is the most professionally responsible approach to evaluating this supplier? Option A. Proceed with the supplier based on their competitive pricing, with a plan to address any potential labor issues only if they arise. Option B. Prioritize the supplier based on their lower price, as cost efficiency is the primary objective of the procurement review. Option C. Conduct thorough due diligence on the supplier's labor practices, working conditions, and compliance with relevant labor laws and ethical standards, even if it delays the cost-saving initiative. Option D. Accept the supplier's offer immediately due to the substantial cost savings, assuming their self-declarations of compliance are sufficient. The correct answer is C. Conduct thorough due diligence on the supplier's labor practices, working conditions, and compliance with relevant labor laws and ethical standards, even if it delays the cost-saving initiative. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge in navigating the ethical and regulatory landscape of supply chain management within a large organization like Grupo Bimbo. The core difficulty lies in balancing the pursuit of cost efficiencies with the imperative to uphold ethical sourcing and compliance with labor laws. The pressure to reduce costs can create a temptation to overlook potential red flags in supplier practices, leading to significant reputational and legal risks. Careful judgment is required to identify and address these risks proactively, ensuring that cost-saving measures do not compromise the company's commitment to responsible business conduct. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a comprehensive due diligence process that extends beyond mere price comparisons. It necessitates a thorough investigation into the supplier's labor practices, working conditions, and adherence to relevant labor laws and ethical standards. This proactive stance aligns with Grupo Bimbo's commitment to corporate social responsibility and ethical sourcing, which are increasingly becoming regulatory expectations and market differentiators. By prioritizing suppliers who demonstrate a strong commitment to fair labor practices and compliance, the company mitigates risks of association with unethical operations, avoids potential legal penalties, and strengthens its brand reputation. This approach reflects best professional practice by integrating ethical considerations into strategic procurement decisions, ensuring long-term sustainability and stakeholder trust. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach is to solely focus on the lowest bid without any further investigation. This is a significant regulatory and ethical failure because it disregards the potential for suppliers to achieve low costs through exploitative labor practices, such as underpayment, excessive working hours, or unsafe working conditions. Such practices can violate labor laws and international ethical standards, exposing Grupo Bimbo to severe reputational damage, legal liabilities, and potential boycotts. Another incorrect approach is to rely solely on supplier self-declarations regarding labor practices without independent verification. While self-declarations can be a starting point, they are not a substitute for robust due diligence. This approach fails to address the possibility of misrepresentation or a lack of understanding of compliance requirements by the supplier. It creates a blind spot that could lead to unknowingly engaging with suppliers who are not genuinely compliant, thereby failing to meet ethical and potentially regulatory obligations. A third incorrect approach is to prioritize suppliers based on existing relationships without assessing their current labor practices. Past performance or long-standing partnerships do not guarantee current compliance. This approach risks perpetuating relationships with suppliers whose practices may have deteriorated over time, leading to the same ethical and regulatory risks as focusing solely on price. It demonstrates a lack of ongoing vigilance and a failure to adapt to evolving compliance standards and ethical expectations. Professional reasoning. Professionals in procurement and supply chain management should adopt a risk-based approach to supplier selection. This involves establishing clear ethical sourcing policies and integrating them into the procurement process. When evaluating potential suppliers, particularly those offering significantly lower prices, a comprehensive due diligence framework should be employed. This framework should include assessing labor practices, environmental impact, and adherence to all applicable laws and regulations. Regular audits and ongoing monitoring of key suppliers are crucial to ensure continued compliance. In situations where cost savings are a primary driver, professionals must be trained to identify and escalate potential ethical or regulatory concerns to relevant departments, e.g., legal, compliance, sustainability, for further review before making a final decision. The decision-making process should prioritize long-term value and risk mitigation over short-term cost advantages. Question 13. Process analysis reveals that the current accounts payable process involves multiple manual checks and approvals, leading to significant processing time and associated labor costs. A proposal has been made to automate a substantial portion of these checks and approvals to reduce operational expenses. Which of the following approaches best balances the objective of cost reduction with the imperative of maintaining robust internal controls and regulatory compliance? Option A. Immediately implement the proposed automation by removing all manual checks and approvals that are deemed time-consuming, focusing solely on achieving the projected cost savings. Option B. Rely on the anecdotal feedback from a few long-tenured employees who believe the current manual checks are largely redundant and can be safely eliminated to expedite the process. Option C. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment of the current accounts payable process, identify key controls, and test their effectiveness. Based on this analysis, design and implement automated controls that address identified risks and ensure compliance with relevant financial reporting and anti-fraud regulations. Option D. Prioritize the automation of the most visible and frequently performed manual tasks, assuming that this will inherently improve overall control effectiveness and reduce overall risk. The correct answer is C. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment of the current accounts payable process, identify key controls, and test their effectiveness. Based on this analysis, design and implement automated controls that address identified risks and ensure compliance with relevant financial reporting and anti-fraud regulations. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between achieving cost efficiencies and maintaining robust internal controls, particularly within a large, multinational organization like Grupo Bimbo. The need to streamline processes must be balanced against the regulatory requirements and ethical obligations to prevent fraud, ensure accurate financial reporting, and maintain operational integrity. Careful judgment is required to identify and implement changes that enhance efficiency without compromising these critical safeguards. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a systematic and evidence-based evaluation of existing controls before implementing changes. This aligns with principles of good corporate governance and risk management, which are often underpinned by regulatory frameworks requiring adequate internal controls. By conducting a thorough risk assessment and control testing, the company can identify specific vulnerabilities and design targeted improvements. This proactive and analytical method ensures that any proposed changes are well justified, effective in mitigating identified risks, and compliant with relevant regulations, such as those pertaining to financial reporting accuracy and anti-fraud measures. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on cost reduction without a commensurate assessment of control impact would be professionally unacceptable. This could lead to the inadvertent weakening of critical controls, increasing the risk of errors, fraud, or non-compliance. Such an approach would likely violate ethical duties to act with due care and diligence, and could contravene regulatory mandates that require companies to establish and maintain effective internal control systems. For instance, if a control designed to prevent duplicate payments is eliminated purely for cost savings, it creates a significant risk of financial loss and potential regulatory scrutiny for inadequate financial oversight. Another incorrect approach that relies on anecdotal evidence or the opinions of a few individuals without objective testing is also professionally unsound. This method is subjective and prone to bias, failing to provide the necessary assurance that controls remain effective. It disregards the systematic approach mandated by many regulatory bodies and professional standards, which emphasize data-driven decision-making and objective validation of control effectiveness. This could result in the retention of ineffective controls or the removal of necessary ones, both leading to increased risk and potential noncompliance. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve a structured risk-based approach. First, identify the objectives of the process being analyzed. Second, identify the key risks that could prevent these objectives from being met. Third, identify the existing controls designed to mitigate these risks. Fourth, assess the effectiveness of these controls through testing and analysis. Fifth, evaluate potential process improvements, considering their impact on risk and control effectiveness. Finally, implement changes that demonstrably enhance efficiency while maintaining or strengthening the control environment, ensuring compliance with all applicable regulations and ethical standards. Question 14. During the evaluation of a candidate for a management position at Grupo Bimbo, which of the following approaches to gathering information about the candidate's background is most aligned with ethical hiring practices and relevant employment guidelines? Option A. Requesting details about the candidate's personal financial investments to assess their financial acumen and risk tolerance. Option B. Discussing the candidate's involvement in local political organizations to gauge their community engagement and leadership potential. Option C. inquiring about the candidate's previous experience in managing teams, their approach to conflict resolution, and their understanding of supply chain logistics relevant to the role. Option D, asking about the candidate's plans for starting a family or their current marital status to understand their potential long-term commitment to the company. The correct answer is C, inquiring about the candidate's previous experience in managing teams, their approach to conflict resolution, and their understanding of supply chain logistics relevant to the role. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the need for efficient information gathering with the ethical obligation to protect sensitive company data and comply with internal policies. A hiring manager must exercise careful judgment to ensure that the information obtained is relevant to the candidate's suitability for the role without crossing ethical or legal boundaries. The core of the challenge lies in distinguishing between legitimate pre-employment inquiries and those that could be discriminatory or invasive. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it focuses on job-related skills, experience, and qualifications. This aligns with Grupo Bimbo's commitment to fair hiring and non-discrimination, as well as general employment law principles that prohibit inquiries into protected characteristics unless directly relevant to the job and legally permissible. By seeking information about past performance, problem-solving abilities, and teamwork, the hiring manager is gathering data that directly informs the candidate's potential success in the role, thereby upholding ethical standards and minimizing legal risk. An incorrect approach that involves inquiring about a candidate's family planning or marital status is professionally unacceptable. This constitutes a direct violation of anti-discrimination principles, as such information is irrelevant to job performance and can lead to biased hiring decisions. Legally, asking about these topics can expose the company to claims of discrimination. Another incorrect approach, such as asking about a candidate's political affiliations, is also ethically and legally problematic. Political beliefs are personal and unrelated to a candidate's ability to perform job duties, and inquiring about them can create a hostile work environment and lead to accusations of bias. Furthermore, probing into a candidate's financial history beyond what is directly relevant to a role requiring financial responsibility, e.g., a CFO position, can be seen as an invasion of privacy and may not be a reliable indicator of job performance. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of the company's hiring policies, relevant employment laws, and ethical guidelines. Professionals should always ask, is this information directly relevant to the candidate's ability to perform the essential functions of the job? If the answer is not a clear yes, the question should be avoided. It is also advisable to consult with HR or legal counsel when in doubt about the appropriateness of a particular line of questioning. The focus should remain on objective, job-related criteria to ensure a fair and legally compliant hiring process. Question 15. Operational review demonstrates that a proposed change to the production line scheduling, intended to increase output by 5%, will require employees to start their shifts 30 minutes earlier without a corresponding adjustment in their break times. The employees have expressed significant concern about this change, citing increased childcare challenges and reduced personal time. As a shift supervisor, how should you address this situation? Option A. Inform the employees that the change is necessary for operational efficiency and that their concerns, while noted, are secondary to the company's production targets. Option B. Promise the employees that their concerns will be taken into consideration and that a review will be conducted without committing to any specific actions or timelines. Option C. Schedule a meeting with the affected employees to listen to their concerns, acknowledge the impact of the proposed change, and collaboratively explore alternative solutions or adjustments that could mitigate their difficulties while still aiming to achieve the operational objective. Option D. Immediately implement the new schedule as directed by management, assuring employees that they will eventually adapt to the new routine. The correct answer is C. Schedule a meeting with the affected employees to listen to their concerns, acknowledge the impact of the proposed change, and collaboratively explore alternative solutions or adjustments that could mitigate their difficulties while still aiming to achieve the operational objective. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a challenge in balancing operational efficiency with adherence to Grupo Bimbo's internal ethical guidelines and potentially relevant labor laws concerning employee welfare and fair treatment. The core conflict lies in the potential for a seemingly minor operational shortcut to have significant negative implications for employee morale, trust, and potentially legal compliance if not handled with sensitivity and transparency. The pressure to meet production targets can create a temptation to overlook or downplay employee concerns, making objective assessment and ethical decision-making paramount. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach prioritizes open communication, empathy, and a commitment to finding a solution that respects both operational needs and employee well-being. This aligns with Grupo Bimbo's stated values of integrity and respect for people. By directly addressing the employees, acknowledging their concerns, and actively seeking collaborative solutions, the manager demonstrates leadership that fosters trust and a positive work environment. This proactive and employee-centric approach is best professional practice as it mitigates risks of grievances, low morale, and potential legal challenges, while also reinforcing a culture of ethical conduct and continuous improvement. It reflects a deep understanding of the human element in operational success. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves dismissing the employee's concerns as minor inconveniences or exaggeration. This demonstrates a lack of empathy and a failure to recognize the impact of operational decisions on the workforce. Ethically, it violates the principle of treating individuals with respect and dignity. From a regulatory perspective, depending on the specific nature of the inconvenience, it could potentially lead to claims of unfair labor practices or a hostile work environment, even if not explicitly illegal. Another incorrect approach is to immediately implement the proposed change without any consultation or consideration of the employee's feedback. This is a top-down, authoritarian style that disregards the valuable insights and lived experiences of the frontline staff. It signals a lack of trust in employees and can breed resentment and disengagement. Professionally, it is a failure to engage in effective stakeholder management and can lead to unforeseen operational disruptions if the change is poorly received or implemented without understanding its practical implications for the workers. A third incorrect approach is to promise a solution without a clear plan or commitment to follow through. This erodes trust and can be perceived as disingenuous. While appearing to address the issue, it ultimately leaves the problem unresolved and employees feeling unheard and devalued. This can lead to a decline in morale and productivity, and a perception of managerial incompetence or dishonesty. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such situations should adopt a structured decision-making process that begins with active listening and information gathering. This involves understanding the full scope of the employee's concerns and the operational context. Next, they should evaluate potential solutions against both operational objectives and ethical/regulatory standards, considering the impact on all stakeholders. Transparency and open communication are crucial throughout the process. When possible, involving employees in finding solutions fosters buy-in and leads to more sustainable outcomes. The ultimate goal is to achieve a balance that upholds the company's values and operational effectiveness while ensuring fair and respectful treatment of all personnel. Question 16. Cost-benefit analysis shows that implementing a new automated inventory management system could significantly reduce operational costs by an estimated 15% annually. However, preliminary discussions suggest this system might require access to employee personal data for performance tracking, which could potentially conflict with data privacy regulations. What is the most responsible course of action for Grupo Bimbo to take? Option A. Proceed with the system implementation, assuming that the cost savings outweigh any minor or unlikely regulatory concerns. Option B. Implement the new system immediately to capture the cost savings and address any potential data privacy issues that may arise later. Option C. Delegate the decision to the operations team, trusting their judgment on the feasibility and compliance of the new system. Option D. Proceed with the implementation of the new system after a thorough review by the legal and compliance departments to ensure full adherence to all relevant data privacy laws and regulations. The correct answer is D. Proceed with the implementation of the new system after a thorough review by the legal and compliance departments to ensure full adherence to all relevant data privacy laws and regulations. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in business operations where a proposed initiative, while seemingly beneficial on the surface, carries potential risks that could impact compliance and ethical standing. The challenge lies in balancing the pursuit of efficiency and cost savings with the imperative to uphold regulatory standards and ethical principles. A hasty decision without thorough due diligence could lead to significant legal repercussions, reputational damage, and operational disruption. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a comprehensive risk assessment that explicitly considers the regulatory implications of the proposed change. This aligns with the principles of responsible business conduct and proactive compliance management. By engaging legal and compliance teams, Grupo Bimbo demonstrates a commitment to operating within the bounds of applicable laws and regulations. This proactive stance ensures that any potential benefits are weighed against the likelihood and severity of regulatory noncompliance, thereby safeguarding the company's integrity and long-term sustainability. This approach reflects best professional practice by prioritizing a holistic view of decision-making, integrating risk management with strategic planning. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves proceeding with the initiative solely based on the projected cost savings, without adequately assessing the regulatory landscape. This demonstrates a failure to adhere to the principle of lawful operation, a fundamental ethical and regulatory requirement. Such an oversight could lead to violations of labor laws, environmental regulations, or data privacy statutes, resulting in fines, sanctions, and legal action. Another incorrect approach is to delegate the decision-making entirely to the operational team without involving legal or compliance expertise. This creates a significant blind spot regarding potential legal and ethical pitfalls. It signifies a disregard for the specialized knowledge required to navigate complex regulatory environments and can result in unintentional noncompliance, which is as detrimental as intentional breaches. A third incorrect approach is to dismiss potential regulatory concerns as minor or unlikely without concrete evidence or expert consultation. This exhibits a lack of due diligence and a potentially cavalier attitude towards compliance obligations. It can lead to underestimation of risks and a failure to implement necessary mitigation strategies, ultimately exposing the company to significant legal and financial liabilities. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a structured decision-making process that begins with clearly defining the problem and objectives. This should be followed by a thorough identification of all relevant stakeholders, including legal and compliance departments. Comprehensive assessment of potential risks and benefits, with a specific focus on regulatory and ethical implications, is crucial. This should involve consulting with subject matter experts and gathering all necessary information before evaluating alternative solutions. Finally, the chosen course of action should be documented, with clear justification and a plan for ongoing monitoring and review to ensure continued compliance and ethical conduct. Question 17. Regulatory review indicates that a key supplier for Grupo Bimbo has experienced a significant operational disruption that will impact their ability to deliver critical raw materials for at least 2 weeks. This information is not yet public. A senior executive receives an informal inquiry from a financial analyst at a reputable investment firm asking about potential supply chain vulnerabilities. The executive is considering how to respond to this inquiry. Option A. Share the information about the supplier's disruption with a small group of trusted institutional investors who are long-term shareholders to give them advance notice. Option B. Advise the financial analyst that Grupo Bimbo does not comment on supplier-specific issues and suggest they look for publicly available information. Option C. Directly inform the financial analyst about the specific details of the supplier's operational disruption and its potential impact on Grupo Bimbo's production, as the analyst is a known contact. Option D. Respond to the financial analyst by confirming the operational disruption and providing an estimated timeline for resolution. After consulting with Grupo Bimbo's legal and compliance departments to ensure the information is disclosed appropriately and in accordance with all applicable regulations. The correct answer is D. Respond to the financial analyst by confirming the operational disruption and providing an estimated timeline for resolution, after consulting with Grupo Bimbo's legal and compliance departments to ensure the information is disclosed appropriately and in accordance with all applicable regulations. Explanation. The scenario presents a common challenge in corporate compliance. balancing the need for timely information with the imperative to adhere to internal policies and external regulations. The professional challenge lies in navigating potential conflicts of interest, ensuring data integrity, and maintaining confidentiality, all while fostering an environment of open communication. Careful judgment is required to avoid actions that could be misconstrued as insider trading or a breach of fiduciary duty. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a structured, documented, and compliant process for information dissemination. By involving the legal and compliance departments, the company ensures that any information shared externally is vetted for accuracy, completeness, and adherence to disclosure requirements. This proactive engagement mitigates legal and reputational risks, upholding the company's commitment to transparency and fair market practices. It aligns with the principles of good corporate governance and regulatory oversight, which demand that material non-public information be handled with the utmost care. An incorrect approach that involves directly sharing the information with a select group of external stakeholders without proper authorization or review is professionally unacceptable. This action creates a significant risk of selective disclosure, which can be a form of insider trading or market manipulation, violating securities laws and ethical standards. It undermines the principle of equal access to information for all investors. Another incorrect approach, which is to ignore the request and not respond, is also professionally deficient. While it avoids direct violation, it can lead to speculation, damage investor confidence, and potentially create a perception of opacity or evasion. It fails to uphold the company's responsibility to communicate effectively and transparently with its stakeholders. Finally, an incorrect approach that involves sharing the information broadly without any internal review or context could lead to misinterpretation or the dissemination of incomplete data, which can be equally damaging as selective disclosure. It bypasses essential checks and balances designed to protect the company and its investors. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve 1. Identifying the nature of the information and its potential materiality. 2. Consulting internal policies and relevant regulations regarding disclosure. 3. Engaging with legal and compliance teams to determine the appropriate course of action. 4. Ensuring all communications are accurate, timely, and made through authorized channels. 5. Documenting all steps taken and decisions made. Question 18. The control framework reveals that a key procurement manager for Grupo Bimbo is responsible for evaluating bids from several technology service providers. The manager has recently discovered that one of the bidding companies is owned by their sibling. What is the most appropriate course of action for the procurement manager to ensure the integrity of the procurement process and uphold ethical standards? Option A. Proceed with the evaluation as normal, confident that their professional judgment will not be swayed by the personal connection, and ensure the best vendor is chosen. Option B. Discreetly favor the siblings' company during the evaluation, ensuring they receive a competitive advantage without explicitly stating the relationship. Option C. Immediately disclose the familial relationship to their direct supervisor and recuse themselves from all aspects of the vendor selection process related to this bid. Option D. Resign from their position without disclosing the conflict to avoid any appearance of impropriety. Correct answer is C. Immediately disclose the familial relationship to their direct supervisor and recuse themselves from all aspects of the vendor selection process related to this bid. Explanation. The control framework reveals a potential conflict of interest scenario that is professionally challenging due to the inherent tension between personal gain and fiduciary duty. A procurement manager, responsible for selecting vendors for Grupo Bimbo, has a close personal relationship with the owner of a potential supplier. This relationship could influence the manager's decision-making process, potentially leading to a suboptimal choice for the company, either through favoritism or an unconscious bias. Careful judgment is required to ensure that all procurement decisions are made in the best interest of Grupo Bimbo, adhering to principles of fairness, transparency, and value for money. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes ethical conduct and compliance with internal controls and relevant regulations. By immediately disclosing the personal relationship to their supervisor and recusing themselves from the decision-making process, the procurement manager upholds the principles of integrity and objectivity. This action aligns with Grupo Bimbo's likely internal policies on conflicts of interest and general ethical guidelines that mandate transparency and avoidance of situations that could compromise professional judgment. It ensures that the vendor selection process remains fair, competitive, and focused on the company's strategic objectives, thereby protecting Grupo Bimbo from potential financial losses or reputational damage. An incorrect approach of proceeding with the evaluation without disclosure and recusal would represent a significant ethical and regulatory failure. It violates the fundamental duty of loyalty to the employer and creates an unacceptable risk of biased decision-making. This could lead to selecting a vendor based on personal connections rather than merit, potentially resulting in higher costs, lower quality products or services, and a breach of procurement regulations that demand impartiality. Another incorrect approach, such as attempting to subtly influence the decision in favor of the connected vendor while still participating, is equally problematic. This constitutes a breach of trust and could be construed as fraudulent or unethical behavior, exposing both the individual and the company to severe consequences, including legal penalties and reputational harm. A third incorrect approach, such as resigning without disclosing the conflict, while seemingly avoiding direct involvement, still fails to address the root issue and leaves the company vulnerable to the same conflict if another less scrupulous individual were to take over without awareness. The professional reasoning process for similar situations involves a proactive and transparent approach. When faced with a potential conflict of interest, an individual should first identify the nature of the conflict and its potential impact. Second, they should consult relevant company policies and ethical codes. Third, they must disclose the conflict to the appropriate authority, typically a supervisor or compliance department, in a timely and comprehensive manner. Fourth, they should follow the guidance provided by the company, which often involves recusal from decision-making processes related to the conflict. This systematic approach ensures that ethical standards are maintained, regulatory requirements are met, and the organization's interests are protected. Question 19. The monitoring system demonstrates a recurring discrepancy in inventory counts for a specific product line, which appears to be linked to a particular warehouse team's operational procedures. While the immediate financial impact seems minimal, there's a possibility that this could indicate a lapse in internal controls or even a more serious issue. As a team lead, what is the most appropriate immediate course of action? Option A. Discuss the discrepancy informally with the warehouse team lead to understand their perspective and suggest procedural adjustments. Option B. Escalate the discrepancy immediately to the compliance department and the legal team for their review and guidance. Option C. Overlook the discrepancy for now, assuming it is a minor operational glitch that will resolve itself over time. Option D. Attempt to rectify the inventory counts directly with the warehouse team to correct the immediate figures without formal reporting. The correct answer is B. Escalate the discrepancy immediately to the compliance department and the legal team for their review and guidance. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a challenge because it involves a potential breach of internal policy and ethical conduct, requiring a nuanced understanding of reporting obligations and the potential impact on stakeholder trust. The pressure to resolve the issue quickly without proper escalation or investigation can lead to further complications and reputational damage for Grupo Bimbo. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves immediate escalation to the compliance department and the legal team. This aligns with Grupo Bimbo's internal policies, which likely mandate reporting of potential policy violations and ethical concerns to designated departments. This ensures that the situation is handled by individuals with the expertise to investigate thoroughly, assess legal and regulatory implications, and implement appropriate corrective actions. It upholds the principle of transparency and accountability, crucial for maintaining stakeholder confidence and adhering to ethical business practices. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves attempting to resolve the issue independently without involving relevant departments. This fails to adhere to internal reporting protocols and bypasses the established governance structure. It risks overlooking critical legal or regulatory implications, potentially exposing Grupo Bimbo to significant penalties or reputational harm. Ethically, it demonstrates a lack of commitment to due diligence and proper oversight. Another incorrect approach is to ignore the discrepancy, assuming it is a minor oversight. This is a failure of professional responsibility and a direct violation of ethical principles that require proactive identification and resolution of potential issues. It neglects the duty to safeguard the company's interests and maintain accurate reporting, which can have severe consequences if the discrepancy is material. A third incorrect approach is to discuss the discrepancy only with the involved colleague without formal reporting. While collegial discussion can be a first step, it is insufficient when a potential policy breach is identified. It fails to create an official record of the concern and bypasses the formal investigation process, leaving the company vulnerable to unaddressed risks. This approach lacks the necessary rigor and accountability expected in a professional environment. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such situations should follow a structured decision-making process. 1. Identify the potential issue and its implications. 2. Consult internal policies and codes of conduct for guidance on reporting and handling such matters. 3. Escalate the issue to the appropriate internal departments, e.g., compliance, legal, internal audit, as per policy. 4. Cooperate fully with any subsequent investigation. 5. Document all actions taken and communications. This systematic approach ensures that issues are addressed responsibly, ethically, and in compliance with all applicable regulations and company standards. Question 20. Implementation of a new sustainability initiative requires a press release to be issued within 24 hours. The initial draft has been prepared by the marketing team, but it contains specific data points related to environmental impact and resource allocation that have not yet been cross-verified by the operations and finance departments. The marketing team is concerned about missing the deadline for the announcement. What is the most appropriate course of action for the marketing team to ensure both timely dissemination and accuracy of the press release? Option A. Remove the specific data points from the press release to avoid potential inaccuracies and focus on the qualitative aspects of the initiative. Option B. Expedite the review process by requesting a quick sign-off from the heads of operations and finance, highlighting the time sensitivity and focusing their review on the data points. Option C. Issue the press release with the current data and plan to issue a correction if any inaccuracies are found later. Option D. Delay the press release until all data points have been thoroughly reviewed and validated by all relevant departments, even if it means missing the initial 24-hour window. The correct answer is C. Issue the press release with the current data and plan to issue a correction if any inaccuracies are found later. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a challenge in balancing the need for timely information dissemination with the imperative to ensure accuracy and compliance with Grupo Bimbo's internal policies and relevant external regulations. The pressure to release information quickly can lead to overlooking critical review steps, potentially resulting in the dissemination of incomplete or inaccurate data, which could have financial, reputational, and legal consequences. The professional challenge lies in navigating this tension by prioritizing robust verification processes even under time constraints. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach emphasizes a multi-stage review process involving relevant departments. This aligns with best professional practice by ensuring that information is validated by subject matter experts, e.g., finance for financial data, legal for compliance aspects, before public release. This systematic approach minimizes the risk of errors, omissions, or misinterpretations, thereby upholding the integrity of Grupo Bimbo's communications and adhering to principles of transparency and accuracy expected by stakeholders and regulatory bodies. It reflects a commitment to due diligence and responsible corporate communication. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach involves bypassing the standard review process due to time pressure. This is a direct violation of internal control procedures designed to prevent errors and misrepresentations. Ethically, it demonstrates a disregard for accuracy and due diligence, potentially misleading stakeholders and damaging the company's credibility. From a regulatory perspective, depending on the nature of the information, this could lead to non-compliance with disclosure requirements. Another incorrect approach is to rely solely on the initial draft without seeking input from other departments. This fails to leverage the expertise within the organization that is crucial for a comprehensive and accurate assessment. It can lead to the omission of critical context or the inclusion of information that, while factually correct in isolation, is misleading when presented without proper framing or legal review. This approach risks both internal policy breaches and external regulatory noncompliance. A third incorrect approach is to delegate the final approval to a single individual without a structured review process. This concentrates risk and bypasses the collective wisdom and oversight that a departmental review provides. It creates a single point of failure and increases the likelihood of overlooked issues, which can have significant professional and regulatory ramifications. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such situations should adopt a structured decision-making process. First, assess the true urgency and the potential impact of delay versus the risk of error. Second, identify the minimum necessary review steps that can be expedited without compromising accuracy or compliance. This might involve pre-approved templates for certain types of announcements or designated individuals who can provide rapid, albeit focused, approvals. Third, communicate any deviations from standard procedure and the rationale behind them to relevant stakeholders. Finally, always err on the side of caution when accuracy and compliance are at stake, recognizing that a minor delay is preferable to a significant error or regulatory infraction.